December 28th violation?
Actually, I think, Trooper Todd.
Good morning.
Will be brief, actually. For testing about the units, proceed with the truth, the whole truth, nothing else.
I do.
See. Name, please, spell last name for the vote record.
Trooper Tyler Dodds, DODDS,
How we employed.
work for the New Hampshire State Police Troop.
And on December 28th of last year, were you at Hemlock Court in Newfields?
I was.
Why were you there?
I had been requested to respond there for a planned protest event, which was being held in apparent response to the passage of the town ordinance preventing picketing in front of any private residence in Newfields.
And what happened at about 7 o'clock?
About 7 o'clock, we began to have the arrival of a group that planned to show up for that protest. The first vehicle being 3 individuals, one of whom was Mr. Staples.
Seen him go around today?
He is the seat of Lieutenant State.
Right, since I identified as
Record will so reflect.
So what happens when the first group left?
When Mr. Staples and 2 others arrived in that vehicle, they identified themselves as the organizers of they referred to it as the Vigil event. Myself and Officer Strand approached them and explained the enforcement of the ordinance and how it would be that night based on guidance we received from the state AG's office. Specifically that remaining in front of any specific residence or repeatedly passing in front of any specific residence would constitute picketing in accordance with the ordinance.
And so what was their response?
They initially indicated that they were going to cancel the event and mentioned doing a march of some kind. There was some conversation about that, and they indicated that that would be the plan, was to cancel the event. At that time, myself and Officer Strand returned to a staging position. The 3 individuals remained essentially in the same location, exited their vehicle, and remained in front of the residence there.
What residence?
That would be 71 Hemlock Court. It's in the cul-de-sac circle in front of the governor's home.
Oh. And so they stayed right in front of, they weren't on the property, but they were in the cul-de-sac right in front of 71 Hemlock Court.
Correct, and just for clarity's sake, this is a group that I was familiar with previously for protests at that location specifically.
Okay. So then, you know.
After a few minutes, it became clear that this group of individuals was not leaving. Myself and Officer Strand reapproached them and again attempted to cite them to warn them initially under the ordinance. There was some rigorous debate over whether or not they believed the ordinance was constitutional, and ultimately Mr. Bennett, who was another individual who was there, was cited. Both individuals were told they would be cited, however, due to the back and forth and the amount of time it took to get Mr. Bennett cited. Originally it was only him that was cited at that time, however, it was the feeling of both myself and Officer Strand that both individuals at that point had violated the ordinance. As we were discussing or dealing with this ordinance with Mr. Bennett, who was there, additional protesters arrived and parked in the area and grouped up around us. When Mr. Bennett was issued a summons, the entire group again was warned about the ordinance. The group briefly left the circle for a period of less than 5 minutes, returned to the circle again, passed in front of the governor's house, and was stopped going up a path adjacent to the governor's home. At that point, the entire group was summoned under the ordinance, including Mr. Staples.
Okay. Nothing?
Thank you. Cross-exam?
Yes. So, who lives at 71 Hemlock Street?
So anyway, Hemlock Court would be the governor,
Court, sorry.
and the wife and children of the governor as well.
The governor, Governor Sununu, public official, correct?
That's correct.
And so you knew he lived there, obviously, that's why you guys were there.
Sure.
And you said the guidance that you received from the AG was that if anyone remained in front of any residence, or pass by a residence twice, they would be cited for ticketing?
Not specifically twice, but repeatedly passing.
Repeatedly passing in front of the house, any house, correct?
Correct.
Okay. He didn't say anything about signs
No.
or noise?
Specifically remaining in front of, passing in front of, or obvious political speech for that position.
So just being there, basically.
Remaining, obviously, we're speaking in the context of political speech.
Okay. And so this was to target political speech then?
This was the target picketing.
Picketing.
And defining on the ordinance, which is what we reached out for clarification.
So you were using this ordinance to protect Governor Sununu's house from picketing?
Yes.
And are government buildings protected by the ordinance?
No, they're not.
Is there a distance that, you know, surrounding within the town hall or something?
Not prescribed by the statute, no.
Correct. And have you seen the Zoom call? Were you a witness to the Zoom call?
I'm not a party to any Zoom call.
Okay. And so you said that we identified ourselves as organizers. Who exactly identified themselves as organizers?
I don't recall specifically who said what. I just remember speaking to you, Mr. Gerhardt, and Mr. Bennett in the vehicle, that you guys identified yourselves as the organizers of the Vigil event.
All right. And so what did Bennett do to get the original, like what was his, why did he get the ticket?
I don't know, object to relevance.
Yeah, so that's not relevant to this case. He's not the defendant on trial like you are, so anything
Well, it goes,
specific to you.
this is the relevance, is that he was ticketed and then allowed to stay the whole time because he was then eventually the one that got arrested, right? So I'm wondering why didn't they tell him to leave once they gave him the ticket like they did to me?
Not relevant to the findings you're asking me to make in this case or that I'm required to make, so.
All right, so. So what was the conversation that you had when we first came up in the window? You said that we were going to get ticketed for picketing right when we got there?
No, I had just arrived. I made contact with you folks as well as Officer Strand. We brought you copies which we offered of the ordinance to make sure you were aware of said ordinance. You indicated you were very aware of it and were there in response to it.
Correct.
And we discussed the enforcement of that ordinance and it was explained what guidance we had.
So did I talk to you about how we were trying to challenge the legality and that we were asking for elements of the offense? You said we got into some constitutional discussion.
I don't specifically recall, but I'm sure that those were similar subjects to what we discussed. It's the legality.
The legality of the enforcement of the ordinance, correct? So whose idea was it to march?
I believe that was your idea.
You believe it was my idea? Your belief is false. So, what is marching? How would you characterize or define marching?
Well, in the context of a political protest, that would be a march that starts at one location and ends somewhere else.
Okay. And did we ever say we were there to march?
Again, we had discussion about the particulars of the enforcement of this ordinance, and you did.
Was it a march or a candlelight vigil?
If you'd allow me to answer your first question. We had conversation about the particulars of the ordinance, and it was discussed that you guys would do a march instead of a vigil at one point before we parted ways for the first time.
All right, so I do have a video to show that it was the state troopers' orders that we had to march, and this is where I'm gonna raise the entrapment, defense. I don't know what the process is on that, but we were made to march, by the troopers. They said that was the only thing we could do, is that correct?
I would disagree with that statement.
Okay, well, we got it on video. So, can we watch that, or?
How long is it?
Five minutes.
Well, is this a edited version or?
No, I don't edit anything. I don't know how to do that.
Could you let me answer?
I answered your question. You asked.
I didn't finish asking my
Oh,
question.
please.
Is this an edited version of what Skylar Bennett recorded?
How could I have? No, this is what I recorded. This is what I recorded.
Okay, I've yet to see this.
Okay, do you,
No, in brevity's sake, let's just.
okay, all right, so why don't you bring it up? And I guess we'll all look at it.
So yeah, the lights, we got the lights on, it's time. We got this guy shining this thing in our face. Thanks, buddy, I appreciate that. Or no, oh, he's shining at the other guy now, yeah. Super direct. So yeah, there's our props right here. We'll see what they have to say here. How you doing, officer? Good, how you doing? No, just Candlelight Vigil. I don't think you can. I just want to let you guys know, town ordinance does cover if the Candlelight Vigil will count as picketing. What do you mean? The town ordinance is not repealed. They were passed by the legislature though. What's your name? Hold on. What's your name? Mike Dots, or state police. What is it, Mike? I'm sorry, what? DOD, regular name tag. Okay, Trooper Dots, TMDODDS. The town ordinance that was passed, the town of Newfield in the last week is, banned any sort of picketing directed at any private residence, and we'll cover. We're not directing anything at a private residence, sir. It doesn't matter if you are here in front of a private residence, that will count as picketing. So what do you mean? Just being here counts as picketing?
Hold on, guys, just one second. One second. Just make a question for you. Serious question. Now, this is town property across the street here, correct?
Correct.
So we can have our Candlelight Vigil there. It's not a residence.
That's not correct. So that is private property owned by the water department of the town of Newfield. That's been posted for no trespass, and the troopers that are over there. I don't see any no trespass.
No, understood. All right, guys, just one second. Hold on. Okay, so it's private property owned by the town. Okay, the picketing statute covers picketing in front of residential property.
It's picketing targeted at a residence.
We're not targeting any residents. That's the thing that I'm trying to tell you. So where is your evidence and why are you thinking that we're targeting a residence is what I'm saying.
No, I know, I've seen it. We have a copy of the town ordinance. We've already seen it.
We're not angry at you.
Yeah, no,
We know what you guys are
I'm just,
doing.
hold on, can I say something? Can I say something? I understand. I just have a loud voice. We understand what that is. We're not targeting anything at a residence or anything like that. So I don't know where you're getting that idea from. So that's because it's been organized to be in this general area, obviously in connection with protests against the governor. It's not a protest. It's not obviously anything because we haven't said that it's about a protest against the governor or anything. We haven't said that at all. Whether you say it or not, you're showing up in a private residence on a private street. This isn't the town hall. This isn't the state house. It is actually kind of the state house where this guy is running it from there. But I mean, that's not.
Okay,
We understand what you're saying here. But it is publicly owned property, right?
It is, but unfortunately, if you guys stay in any way, shape, or form, or repeatedly pass in front of any particular private residence, that would count as directed at.
Well, you're allowed to march, right? So if we walk, it's fine.
If you walk, for instance, the length of the street, and did not just walk in a circle around one particular house, and that would be acceptable.
Well, how far do we have to go? Hold on. How far do we have to go?
The street back, if that's what you guys.
Is that written?
That's not written into the statute, that's my understanding of it, and like I said, my understanding of it is all of them will go on right now.
All right, so
I know, if we try right here, like,
I'm I'm saying this. Can I say something? We're gonna cancel the vigil. We're just gonna hang out and talk to the people who are already here. And we're not gonna have a vigil. We won't light any candles or anything. And we're gonna talk to each other.
We're gonna march. You said we're allowed to march as long as
If we want to march, we can march.
Yeah.
But we're not protesting, we're not picketing, we're not having a vigil, we're not gonna light any candles.
One second.
Okay?
Okay.
But we have people that are already here, and we want to have a meetup with people that are already here.
Okay, and so,
End of story.
question for you real quick. Who's in charge?
Who's in charge?
Yeah. I just wanna know some guy's not gonna pop out of the woodwork and go, I never said that. Ah! Are you in charge or you're just delivering a
That's not
message?
your people right now. I'm not obviously in charge. My name's Trooper Dodds.
Okay.
This is, if you have an issue though, if you have an issue with the interpretation that we have, or if you have a frustration with a black player or anything like
Yeah,
that,
well, I have a huge issue with it.
you are absolutely welcome to reach out to the Attorney General, because everything we're trying to do tonight.
Well, no, we don't want to talk to your supervisor first.
Everything we're doing tonight, we're running through the State Attorney General, because we want to make sure that we're not.
Sure, that's fine.
As much as possible, but we also have to enforce the state laws and the Newtown ordinance.
We don't, right, and the Newtown ordinance is moot at this point because
Nobody's here to bother you guys. We're respecting shit out.
So we can just park, we can park on the side of the road over here and we're good, right?
To be honest with you, I have no idea if they're gonna count that.
Hey, I thought you said you were in charge. Well, you're,
No, I didn't. I definitely am
So,
not.
well, you're gonna have to get back.
All right.
You're gonna have to get back to us because we're not gonna light any candles, but we're gathering here as free men, and we're not protesting anything. We don't have signs or anything. We're not.
So what I'm telling you is, like I said, if that becomes an issue, if that's your plan, that becomes an issue, I'll come back out and I'll talk to you.
fine, sounds good. We'll see you right here.
Thank you
I'll
so
just
much.
park right here, whatever. Thanks, dude.
Appreciate it.
Are you still recording? Yes. All right, fine. Guys, start the recording, okay? What's up, buddy?
So what's the plan? So, no candles.
Okay.
For everybody else to get.
So there's,
So the
yeah, so
record
they,
will reflect that the court has reviewed the video as offered by the defendant in this matter.
So,
And
does that
I'll
jog
admit
your-
it and give it the weight that I think it deserves, and you may ask your next question.
does that jog your memory about whose idea was to march?
It looks like in the video, somebody in the vehicle said, what if we marched instead?
Could we march? And you said we could, or gather, you allowed us to get out of our vehicles, you did not ticket us, right then?
I told you, to the best of my ability, what the ordinance wanted enforcement of, and I explained to you that I'd reapproach you if it was an issue.
And so you said, just stopping and passing in front of a residence is enough and no signage necessary to be considered picketing,
Correct.
okay? Thank you. And, was that the guidance that the AG gave you,
Yes,
directly from the AG?
that was the guidance that I had been passed on, which was
From the
AG's office.
Okay, thank you. And are government officials considered individuals pursuant to this ordinance?
Okay.
Jack,
Yeah, so that gets into the legal argument. I understand that you are intending to file something asking me to find the town ordinance unconstitutional and to dismiss on that basis. You haven't yet, we're gonna clean that up at the end. But this officer, that's not, his responsibility is to enforce the town ordinance, which he was there to do. Whether or not it's ultimately constitutional is a separate issue. So he can't offer his legal opinion about those things.
All right. And, so we were allowed to march
Okay, ask and answer. Next question.
and, right, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of talking out loud. So when the march, when the walk, was it, I mean, when the march, the march was consisted of what exactly? And where to? Can we draw a map of this thing and how it progressed? A little bit more accurate than the last trial I was at, please?
I guess if he can, he didn't go on the march, so I don't know if he can draw it up.
He drew it the last time that I tried to take pictures of, and the bailiff said I wasn't allowed to gather that evidence.
So you're asking this officer? or
To
this-
draw the map again, a little bit more in scale, if possible.
You know, actually, Your Honor, we have all the evidence from the other people.
I'd rather not use that same one.
Use it.
Okay, so I have obviously heard that other testimony. Again, in the interest of time, I'm gonna run out of time and we're gonna have to come back. And if
That's fine. If
you know, at
it's
this
all about
point,
justice,
I've
then
got
let's do
other
it.
trials and we're allotted half an hour for each case and he
Hey.
doesn't ask for any more time.
It's
So-
not my fault.
Well, that is according to the notice
No.
of decision, you have to ask for more time if you think you can't finish it in that amount. With that being said, are you asking him to draw what the,
Yeah, I draw the route, where it started, with all the houses in the neighborhood on there.
no, I'm not gonna allow that at this
Can I
point.
draw it real quick?
If you wanna depict up there what you say it is.
I mean, I'll do it during my testimony, how about that?
In a timely fashion, then I'll allow that.
So,
I think I have a pretty
How
good
many-
understanding of what the neighborhood
Right.
and the court looks like, both based
So
from
we're-
looking at the
all right.
videos and how the houses look and where the path goes up to the country
So this-
store. I
correct.
paid attention.
so there's like 3 houses, is it correct? There's 3 houses in the cul-de-sac?
One second. Can Officer Schwartz be excused? He's sitting here, and I know I asked you to wait, and you look like you're freezing, so can he be excused at this point? Because we've had the video come in, and he's not part of the December 28th incident that I'm aware of.
He is not.
All right.
Okay, you may be excused. Thank you, sir. All right, go ahead.
So, how many houses are there in the cul-de-sac?
As I recall, 2.
2?
The third of them, depends on where you would define the circle, but
So, there are houses to either side of Sununu's house?
yes.
And when the march started from a little bit over in front of Sununu's, where we originally parked, and we got out, and then we walked down the street, how many houses did we walk past that way?
I couldn't tell you specifically or accurately, but
At least one.
you stayed within line of sight, yeah.
We went past at least one house that was his neighbor's house,
Sure.
possibly 2 or 3. And then we had to come back that way, correct?
Almost immediately, yeah.
And so we passed by multiple residences twice at that point, correct?
Sure.
Did we not violate the town ordinance at that point? Technically, by your standards?
Depending on how strictly we wish to enforce that, sure.
So were you there to enforce it or not enforce it? Is there different means of enforcing it? Is it a clear-cut thing where it's like, you know, you do this and we're enforcing it and then we don't have to? Do you have discretion not to enforce it?
Sure do.
Okay. And so is that why you didn't arrest us for passing the other houses?
Well, I think the spirit and intention of the law would be to protect private residences that were targeted for political protest, or any kind of protest, to be fair.
Where in this ordinance does it say that?
Okay, that's
This
the
is
legal
for,
argument.
no, where does, okay, yeah, I mean,
But we already got your testimony on that, which is great.
so we marched past multiple residences and then on the way back, we were coming around the cul-de-sac and did everyone march? That was there?
There was at least one individual, I believe, who had a walking disability.
He had a walking disability, and so he was allowed to stand in one particular place.
Yes, we had a conversation with him, and based on his disability and how to try to accommodate his situation, because he wasn't able to partake in the march, but indicated to us that he didn't want to have an issue, basically.
So you didn't ticket him then?
No, that would be a perfect example of discretion that's used.
And we were allowed to, why were we allowed to walk up the path to the country store?
it's not up to me where you do or do not go. My only job is to enforce the laws and the ordinances of the state and the town.
Are you aware that we had permission from another officer to go up the side path?
I can't speak to that.
So, we got that on video. So it wasn't you,
Presumably not. That was me, not.
but we walked past how many officers approximately on scene up the path?
Again, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how many guys were standing there.
And when did the picketing get triggered? When did it become picketing at that point, after we were allowed to march past multiple residences and all that?
Obviously, after repeatedly passing in front of the governor's residence.
Repeatedly?
Correct.
How many times?
At least 2 or 3.
At least three?
And also depending on, we're also talking about the length of time, as we discussed previously.
Well, when was the first?
Let me answer that. The length of time of remaining in front of as well, gathering up and returning.
So you're saying that we were gathered in front of his house?
I'm saying what a law enforcement officer determines to enforce or not enforce, depending on the totality of circumstances in front of them. There's not necessarily one straw that breaks the camel's back, but obviously there's certain things that add up to a point.
Sure, so what were those things?
Arriving and remaining in front of the residence for approximately a half an hour prior to the walk. Then supposedly leaving the residence. Obviously, Mr. Bennett was cited during that time. Supposedly leaving the residence but remaining away for, again, approximately less than 3 to 5 minutes. I can't recall what it was off the top of my head. Returning again to the house, walking around the circle, then walking up next to the house. All of these things contributed to the decision to enforce the picketing ordinance at that time.
And whose call was it?
I don't recall.
You don't recall? So, what actions did we take on the march that told you we were targeting 71 Hemlock Street?
My understanding was the event was planned and listed address as 71 Hemlock Court as the specific address. Also, my previous understanding that there had been multiple protests against Governor Sununu held by your group at that location multiple times before.
And how is it targeting, like, 'cause when I think of targeting a house, I think of like throwing stuff at it, going on the property. Did anyone ever go on the property?
Well, certainly, well, to answer that question, not that I'm aware of, but certainly your specific example of targeting would be extremely pointed. You could, for instance, in a stalking case, have someone doing the same activity, driving past an ex-lover's house or something like that repeatedly, and that would be targeting.
So you can kind of just,
I believe the legal term is a course of conduct.
so you can pretty much ticket anybody for walking past the residence twice.
I would disagree with your assessment.
If you feel that they were picketing.
I would disagree with that assessment.
Well, how many times would they have to walk past?
Okay, so now we're getting into other people, again, into the legal argument. So finish up your cross-exam of this witness.
I am.
the only thing that you're saying, was targeting the governor's residence was the Candlelight Vigil that had his address in there somewhere? Is that was the targeting? Is that what I'm gathering?
That's one of many factors that would obviously point to targeting that residence.
Okay. And so it wasn't any of the action, there wasn't anything in the march, because you keep referring to the event that was made and the listing of 71 Hemlock, which you guys are claiming. Do we have, I mean, that's what you're saying?
Again, that was one of many factors that were,
What were the other factors?
well, to name a few, again, as I've already answered this question, repeatedly having protests at this event, or at this specific residence.
What's the relevance to this thing?
Okay, so I'm gonna actually stop, because they do think the question's asked and answered. I heard his testimony before, one of which the factors that they considered is the number of times you went by the residence specifically, and the proximity, etc. So he's offered his testimony on that. Do you have another question for him?
All right, so there's no distance that you have to be within a residence in this ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I'm good.
Okay, any redirect?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, please.
Okay, now let's take stock right now of where we are. We're 25 minutes over your allotted time. Are you gonna call Officer O'Brien and Officer,
Strand.
yep,
Just Officer Strand to say that he gave him the
Okay.
text of the ordinance.
okay, because I don't wanna,
That's it.
I don't wanna stop,
If you-
and I'm gonna limit your testimony specifically only to this incident, and nothing outside that. Understand?
Fine.
If
Okay,
he
all
wants to
right.
stipulate that he
Yeah,
received
do
his
you want to
ordinance
stipulate that
on
you
the
received a
28th.
copy of the town ordinance?
Yes.
Okay,
Sure,
all
I
right.
did.
Okay, so we don't need
We
that?
don't need, we're all set.
Okay, all right, and the
State
state
rests.
rests? All right, so this is your opportunity as of December 28th only. You've stipulated that the officer gave you a copy of the.
Can I
town
call
ordinance.
Brian?
If you want to in your case.
Yeah, I
just
want to
here.
talk to her about the Zoom call.
Okay, to the extent that it's relevant,
Mm.
because, but I want to know time-wise, how long we're going to need for your testimony or your direct exam and any testimony you're going to offer, because I've got other people that have waited for their day,
Sure.
and I want to be mindful of that.
They don't care.
Well, let's not all speak for them, but
Well-
in any event, I'm mindful of the time because it matters to me that I keep to the time that I've allotted. So how much time do you think you're going to need?
I don't know. I'm not a good judge of time with my head injury, so I don't,
Okay?
you know. How much was my last one?
Too long.
Too long. Sorry, I'm sorry.
All right, let's keep going. Let's call the officer. If you would, you're calling her in your case in chief?
Please,
Okay,
yes.
Stace Reds, if you would come up and remain standing. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that any testimony or information you provide to the court is true under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. You may be seated. All right, go ahead, sir. You may inquire.
So, were you on a Zoom call about the Candlelight Vigil?
Yes.
And what was discussed on that Zoom
Sorry.
call?
Hold on. Would you just state your name for the record again and how you were employed on the date of December 28, 2020?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Kathleen O'Brien, O-B-R-I-E-N, and I was the lieutenant with the Newfields Police Department on that day.
And the question was, she acknowledged she was on a Zoom call?
Zoom call, and then, what was the Zoom call about?
Can I ask when the Zoom call took place?
Before the Candlelight Vigil.
On the actual date, December 28th?
No,
Okay.
it was a week or two before,
I'd
maybe.
have to look at the notes. I do have the exact date.
Wasn't too much.
Okay.
So,
So the question was, what was the Zoom call about?
what was the point of the Candlelight Vigil upon your interpretation of the Zoom call?
Thank you, Coach. Do you have a copy of that report that I could look at?
Sorry.
While he's looking for that, if you could just generally give me your
I
thoughts on
remember
that.
there being concern about the constitutionality of the ordinance And I remember them saying something to the effect, if we all wear press credentials, they can't arrest any of us. And I remember somebody stating that if we all have firearms, they can't arrest us, and something to the effect of, if we have firearms, let them come at us. I don't want to quote myself though.
Yeah, I remember that before.
And so your next question?
Did you have this on vid? Did you record this?
No,
No.
no. That's why I just had my notes, I took notes that time.
And so, would you agree that the point of the candlelight vigil was to avoid violating the town ordinance upon our understanding of it?
I'm going to object, she doesn't know what the intent of the party is.
Well, if it was
Okay.
discussed specifically, she would.
If I understand the call some for speculation, but to the extent that she was, can answer or that it was,
It was more just about, you were just angry with the constitutionality of it. That's what I got out of that. I don't want to speak to if you thought it's right.
Did I say to bring signs or not to bring signs?
You specifically said don't bring signs.
Did I say we're gonna make noise?
I don't remember that, I'm sorry.
Did I say not to make noise?
I don't
Candlelight,
remember
I
about
mean,
noise.
so-
I do remember something about prayer, so
Prayer.
there's going to be some noise, obviously, if we're praying.
Sure, I guess you could call that noise. And so, sorry, threw me for a loop. So we didn't ask for people to bring signs, and, we were concerned about the constitutionality of, sorry, I lost my train of thought, I'm trying to gather the question that I was gonna
when you
ask.
just take a minute to think, let me just, can Officer Strand and, is it Strand? Sorry. And Trooper Dodds be excused?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second set of trials today?
No, we're going to stipulate all the testimony.
Yeah,
from the
that's been
first
stipulated
round. Okay.
too in that regard, so you may be excused, thank you.
Thank you very much, Norm.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, go ahead, Mr. Staples. If you've gathered yourself or you're ready.
So, oh, there it was. So, did I ever advocate on the Zoom call for people to go onto the governor's property or any other property for that matter? Was the location at the cul-de-sac, the little park there, the circle area? What?
No,
What do you mean?
no, because on the Facebook post that you made, you specifically stated the governor's address.
The Facebook post had, sure, maybe had the governor's
It
address
did
on
have the
there.
governor's address, I believe.
But I'm talking about on the Zoom call, not on the Facebook post, I'm talking about the Zoom call. Okay.
I believe you just said Hemlock Court.
Hemlock Court, right. So, at the cul-de-sac,
Okay.
was that your recollection? That it was at the cul-de-sac they were planning to have, did we ever say we want to go on the governor's front lawn and have a candlelight vigil?
No.
No, we didn't. Okay. Did we say we want to go on anybody else's residential lawn?
Not there at all.
Okay. And, what was the guidance you received about the enforcement of the town ordinance and what constitutes picketing?
The guidance I received was the exact same that was just justified by Trooper Dobbs.
That just stopping or walking past?
Targeting a specific residence, a specific person in that residence, repeatedly.
So targeting at the event in the neighborhood, is that the,
I just gave you my answer.
so what was targeting besides the Facebook post with 71 Hemlock Court listed in it?
The repeatedly walking by the residence, I guess it, like he said, the totality of the circumstances, the every Sunday gathering right there, screaming in his house, screaming about the governor.
So all the,
The repeated postings about his residence, specifically 71 Hemlock Court, of where you were going to meet, whether it be for a candlelight vigil or protest, totality of everything.
So, fair to say that the prior protests all compounded into this one event?
Everything kind of led into a lot of things, yeah.
And you were aware that Governor Sununu is obviously the governor at 71 Hemlock Court? Alright, just want to make sure. And I think I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any,
Just briefly.
Questions, Sam?
The evidence from the other trial, can I see the?
I have to get the file, it's in my chambers, I didn't bring it out.
I just want to incorporate the posting that was on the internet that said meet at 71.
Okay, I can take a brief recess so we can also mark it in this one.
Yeah.
Do you take a position, do you want me
I'll
to get it?
stipulate to it, I don't
Okay,
care.
okay.
Yeah, we know it's the governor's
All right,
house.
so we'll stipulate in this matter that the exhibit that was offered at the prior trial 2 weeks ago, and I forget what it's exactly marked, but that references meeting at the location, that may also be offered as evidence or admitted in evidence in this case. Okay.
71.
On 71 Hemlock, got it.
I have no questions for
Okay,
that.
thank you. You may step down and they should be excused.
Yes,
Okay, all right. Do you wish to testify now in this matter?
yes.
Okay, so come on up. Actually, do you want him to just remain seated down there, or do you want him to come up? Okay, you can stay right there if you wish to.
That's fine, yeah, because I got my
Okay, so
stuff
you-
here.
You're already under oath. Yes.
Under
you
oath
may-
still?
Yes, you may be excused. Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, all right, yeah, so I'll go up.
Okay, but this is not gonna get ramped up with
No.
that, because you're up here on the camera. This isn't a performance. This is your opportunity to offer.
Oh, I would do the
testimony.
same, whatever I do there, I would
Come
do
on
here.
up, and you're still under oath, you were previously testified. You lose what you want to tell me when I just keep hearing the same thing.
I'm sorry, I repeat myself, I have head trauma,
Okay, but I'm
okay? You
asking
guys didn't make the cripple guy
They-
march, but he still got ticketed for it,
Okay, we're not gonna
right?
talk about.
So
that.
I am.
So go ahead and tell me what you want to about the events of December 28, 2020 with respect to the allegation that you violated the town ordinance, please.
So the town ordinance does not say anything about targeting a specific residence or anything like that. And we were not targeting the residents, we're targeting the ordinance. So the meetup spot was not 71 Hemlock. The meetup spot was the cul-de-sac, which is where we were. We never went on the property, okay? That was never the intention. The intention was to challenge the legality of the unlawful ordinance that was created, as Trooper Dodds just testified, to target our speech out in front of Sununu's house. Not on his property, out in front, in a public park. So when I showed up, immediately Trooper Dodds comes up and says, we're gonna get ticketed for picketing, we can't be there. Candlelight Vigil counts as picketing. Standing, stopping, walking past things too many times is apparently picketing. So I didn't wanna march, but that's all they said we could do. They said, yeah, we could march. First they said we couldn't be there at all, but then they said we canceled the vigil and they allowed us to stay. And then he has full discretion on when to pull the trigger. So you're gonna let us violate the ordinance walking past all these other people's
So let me
houses?
stop you, because I've heard his testimony, I've heard him testify to it, and I've watched the video of what was said. So that to me is cumulative, meaning I don't need to hear it again. I hear it, I accept it, I've taken notes on it. What do you want to tell me about what happened? I know that happened because I've heard about it. I want to hear any other thoughts you have about it that's not just repeating what we've already heard. So you left off, I know that there was the conversation
So
about
he
marching.
said
I heard
we
about
could
that.
march, we
So
could
then
walk.
tell me what
We
you
were
did.
we were allowed to march down the street past however many houses and all the way back, and we never, ever once stepped on the side of the street in front of Sununu's house. We were in front of all the other houses, and we went around the cul-de-sac on the far side of Sununu's house.
So let me ask you this.
And this is an important part that's coming up.
And I want to hear that, but I want you to take me from, I saw the contact, I've heard the testimony in the other case, which were all the same officers as to, I saw you pull up saying, we're here, this is, and we're going to have a candlelight vigil, and I'm there. So now, I saw in the video, you guys pull away, and the last thing I hear is, we're going to park on the side of the road.
Sure.
Take me, not anyone else, I don't care about anybody else except Frank Staples, who's here.
I got
who's
the
one
video.
that's-
I can
Don't
put
want
that
to
in.
see it. I want your testimony, not anybody else of what they're doing, because you're the one sitting here right now.
Right.
What happened then? And then, without, just give me the details. Then you marched, where did you go?
We
How
got
far
out.
do you think you went?
And there were a few other people that were pulling up, and we all gathered, and we marched down the street, couple minutes, you know, we went past maybe 4 or 5 houses, and then we turned around and walked past those same houses, and
Up by where the cars were parked? Or on the opposite side? Because I have the exhibit, I know it's not to scale, but we
Right.
saw it. It's in
So
my
we-
chambers right now.
up by where the cars were parked,
Yeah.
away on the far side of Sununu's house.
Okay.
We never stepped foot in front of the area in front of Sununu's house. We never went in the closest vicinity of the street. We were closer to all the other houses in the neighborhood than we were on Sununu's. Up until we walked up the pathway when we were at an equal distance from 71 and
Okay.
whatever that other one is.
Then what happened when you went up the pathway?
So, well, before that, we need to backtrack, and so when we came back from the walk down and back, I went up to one of the officers, I said, hey, we want to walk up to the country store, come back, and then we're out of here. That's it. We just want to walk up to the country store, and then we'll come back, we'll get in our cars, we're going to leave. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. So, then, and I'll add that as a supplementary, that video, for evidence, if that's all right. So, we're allowed to walk around the far side of the thing and go up the path, and the group of us, some of us are taller and walk faster, and we had broken up. The group had broken up a little bit, so he said, let's wait for them to catch up, and we were waiting for them to catch up, and then the cops, somebody was like, what are you guys doing? You can't stop. You can't stop. And so I said, we're waiting for them. I said, all right. So I start walking backwards, and I'm like, come on, let's go. And trying to get them to move a little faster so we could meet up, but we're getting ordered to not stop, but we have to go. And next thing you know, they said, everyone stop. You're all getting ticketed. Right? And then they called in the goon squad, and there's like 15 or 20 guys.
Who's the goon squad?
The goon squad, a bunch of state troopers in riot gear, right? And they pointed at Skylar and said, get him. And they arrested Skylar while we were all waiting to get tickets, because he was the one that had already been ticketed.
Okay.
So they made us stand there and wait for that to happen. Instead of just giving us tickets and sending us on our way, they called in a hit squad to get at Skylar.
Okay, so that's not as relevant to you, and I think I've heard.
Oh, it was relevant,
Well,
and so then we got the
It's
tickets.
not relevant to me
Sure.
right now and the findings I have to make.
So-
So you were ticketed, anything else about that? Because you just told me what is, I think, relevant is what you did when you got there. You, as in, so is there anything else that you think is important, specific to that you want me to know before I ask about cross-exam? Outside of that, because I want to spend just 2 minutes talking about if you want to file a motion, or if you're going to ask to join another motion on the constitutionality piece, so I want to take a minute for that. That's a separate argument that you can make, and then I'm going to take under advisement. But as to the allegation that you violated the town ordinance, what was important that I hear in the testimony and what I'm considering is what you did when you were there, and I think you told me that. But I don't want to cut you short. If there's something else in the interest of time specific to that, I want to hear it. Otherwise,
Right.
I'm good.
So, we all got ticketed, including the handicapped gentleman who couldn't walk, and also including a legitimate press reporter that was there taking pictures.
Okay, but again, not relevant.
So-
Just my mouth. Mr. Staples, no one else.
So whatever, yeah, they gave me a ticket,
Okay,
and
there
then
you are.
there I am, and, you know, ticketed for picketing in a residential neighborhood, who would have thought?
Okay, cross-exam?
Briefly,
Thank you.
why did you go there on December 28th?
To challenge the town ordinance that Sununu and his brother created in his administration, Sununu's administration, to target our lawful speech that Trooper Dodds agreed it was created for. That's why.
Who were you trying to send a message to? You went there to protest something, but who did you want to
The
get that
people.
message?
Who else? The people who pay your salary.
Why particularly on and Walk Forward?
Because the governor was running the state from his house, and the state house was closed. It was the de facto state house. He was having Zoom meetings and business meetings from his residence. That's why. Because he is the king, tyrant of this state. And he created that law to target our free speech outside his house, as Trooper Dodds testified to. That's
Okay. All
why.
right, member, bring it down, bring it down.
That's fine.
Anything?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's what I thought.
Okay, thank you. You can step down. Let's go and start to
Thank you,
gather
I'm
your
sorry.
welcome. That's all right. Now, just briefly, and then in terms of scheduling, I'm going to hear briefly Attorney Pepis on a matter that she has. Attorney Hippel, you're going to be up next on, and we're going to take a brief recess in between that. Mr. Staples, this concludes your 3 matters that were pending. I'm going to take all of them under advisement, look at my notes, apply the law, consider the testimony that I have, and I'll issue decisions. You've referenced, and throughout this proceeding, I've said to you on a number of times, if you wish to challenge, which I understand you're doing, the constitutionality of the ordinance, and you're asking me to dismiss the matter because you say the ordinance is unconstitutional, are you either going to file your own motion, or are you going to join with the permission of, let's say, Mr. Bennett? I just need to know how much time do I give you, or I need something that you put in, unless you're going to say I joined his with
Can I
permission.
file my own supplementary to whatever they file with their thing, because it's
Yes,
all
I
the same
just-
thing? I mean,
Unless, I guess I have never done it that way, where I don't have
Amos
Mr.
gets
Bennett
scary or
here.
whatever it's called?
If, the way I see it is this, if Mr. Bennett agrees that you can file his motion, I mean, it's the same argument, I'll accept that, but I need that, I think, from Mr. Bennett, or you to file something similar to that you're asking me to take up that same issues that you need to
Well,
raise.
isn't, I think Seth's gonna be filing one as well. And
Yes?
then Bennett's, is he representing Bennett?
I
No.
don't know.
So there's gonna be at least 2 constitutional
Yeah.
challenges.
Mr. Bennett has already filed his.
Yes, he has.
And I
Oh, okay.
filed mine as well.
Yes, I have that. So my
I'll have
question is.
I'll have to
can-
reach out to him about
I
that.
just don't know how to do it, like, can I take notice that he's asking to dismiss it on that and include that? I haven't done it where I don't have an actual motion in a
I
file.
would think it's you as the court, if you find it's unconstitutional, you're gonna have to apply that to
Okay.
whether he files it. or not.
Right, yeah,
So
right?
I'm gonna take note of that. I've got his motion.
I'd like to file something.
Okay, so you don't need to. If you want to stand on
How long
the
do I have?
same arguments, I'll give you 14 days to file anything that you might want to in supplement, and you the same amount, yes. That will be number 2, you can bring it to me. Okay. And with that, that's going to conclude the matter. Other than that, sir, I'm going to find that you do ask me to make a finding, or you are moving to dismiss the statute as unconstitutional and dismiss the
And
ordinance.
entrapment.
And I've heard that argument, but I'll take it under advisement and consider the
And I would
arguments as raised
definitely
in
file a void for vagueness. This statute is
Yeah.
void for
That's
vagueness.
part of Mr. Bennett's.
And the
argument.
constitutionality of it's targeting our free speech. So there's two different things going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, we're in recess, you're finished. Attorney Pepis, if you would come up, I'm gonna hit your matter.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yep, and then we'll hear from attorney, we'll get started with Attorney Hippel's cases.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.